Hi guys, it's Kylie here. Thank you so much for joining me today. It really means a lot to have you here. Today is a really big day for me. It's a day that I have been planning for a long time, but just for a whole host of reasons haven't got around to doing. Mostly fear, if I'm totally honest. And I've just thought, you know what, just stuff it. I'm actually just doing it. So I've wanted to share these stories contained in my book, Miracles and Messages, with a wider audience for a long time. And yeah, just during coronavirus, I've had a lot of time to think about what's important. And I just thought, you know what, if I don't do it now, then when will I? So I am going to be sharing some stories contained in my book. It's called Miracles and Messages, like I said. The byline is true stories that remind us we are not alone, but are loved, guided, and protected throughout our lives. And it's basically a collection of mind-blowing stories of how Jesus has shown up in my life. Each of them are true, each of them have happened to me, and it's just been an incredible journey. I am the most unlikely Christian. I have quite a rebellious spirit at heart. My dad was a very vocal, angry atheist, the most beautiful human being you'll ever meet, but just couldn't understand how God could let a whole host of things happen in this world. And so that was sort of the environment I was brought up in. My mom went to a Catholic convent in northern England, which is enough to put anyone off guard. And yeah, we went to church at like Easter and Christmas time, but I certainly wasn't brought up loving Jesus. We did say grace at dinner time, but I never really heard my mom speak about Jesus, and certainly not in a loving way. But yeah, he certainly had his eye on me, and I had a beautiful friend, one of my best friends, Sally, who very kindly invited me to an Alpha dinner in London at Holy Trinity Brompton with Nikki Gumbel. I didn't realize at the time what an incredible blessing that was, but that was really where I was introduced to Jesus as an adult, and I was quite lost. I guess we all are at 20. Well, I certainly was. Yeah, and just asking a lot of questions and wanting some stability, and loved the idea of being loved and not being alone. And that was, yeah, that was where my personal journey with him began. But when I look back, I realized that his relationship with me began way before then. And the reason that I wrote this book is that there was an incident in our lives which pretty much brought our lives to a grinding halt. And God and Jesus just showed up in such profound ways during that season in our life that I just felt compelled to share the stories with others, just hoping that they would bring a sense of hope to those that need it. And then when I looked back in my life, it was then that I realized how God had been with me all along from day one. And so it was incredible just writing down all of these instances of how Jesus, the Holy Spirit, angels, God showed up um, in my life. And I realized that there's a collection of these, and enough to write a book about. So yeah, I just felt this burning desire to write the book. It was quite supernatural, really. It was just after a tragic, terrible accident that my husband had been involved in. I had two young children. I think Zach was 4 and Jamie was 3 at the time, if I remember correctly. I was trying to keep us afloat emotionally, and keep us all together. I was trying to hold myself together during one of the most traumatic times in our life, and yet God would provide this magnificently gorgeous still space during the day when I would just sit down with my laptop and download all of these incredible events that have happened in my life. And literally it took me 8 weeks of just sitting down and just downloading all of these events, which was so incredible. And yeah, I've published it. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. You'll find the link below if you'd like to purchase it. But it's not about purchasing. I mean, I'm sharing all of the stories in the book, every chapter, here on YouTube for free. So for me, it's just yeah, it's just my little baby ministry, my little gift to Jesus, back to the world, doing my bit for him because he's done so much for me. And as I said, the reason that I share them is that I hope that they bring a sense of hope to others, especially at this difficult time with the virus that's going on around us and the uncertainty of the future and the economic future, etc. So I just want to remind you that we are not alone during this time. Jesus is very real. He's here with us in real time. I've recently started to just have a conversation with him. So not necessarily a formal prayer, but just saying like, hi Jesus, it's me. I'm really battling today, or whatever it is that I have on my heart. And just forming more of a personal connection with him. And I just find it so comforting to know that he is with me in real time and hears me in real time. And once you hear each of these stories, you'll realize that that very much is the case. I didn't always know that, but I'm so glad that I know that now. So without further ado, I shall kick off. I'll read the back. It just gives you some insight into what the story is about. I've said, I have been in two minds about whether to share the stories contained in this book, to write of how I have experienced God in my life, fearful of what others would think. I have, however, come to realize that the concerns of my ego are of no consequence, that I am obliged to share these beautiful stories with others. I'm obliged to share a beautiful message with others, regardless of my discomfort, in the knowledge that these stories of God's constant involvement in our lives will bring a sense of hope and comfort to those who read it, but more importantly, to those who need it. This book is a collection of stories of how He has touched me, protected me, guided me, and loved me throughout my life. It has been a journey of miracles and wonder, awe, love, and awakening. The realization that we are not alone, but are unconditionally loved, guided, and protected throughout our lives has been one of the most comforting and beautiful lessons I have come to learn. This book was written for those who, like me, have questioned whether God exists, whether miracles do occur today, whether the Holy Spirit truly is with us in real time, and whether angels do indeed help us in our time of need. I have had the privilege of learning that the answer to each of these questions is yes. My prayer is that by sharing my story with you, you will be comforted, touched, and changed as I have been. So I shall begin with chapter 1. I have dedicated this book to Jesus. I said, for Jesus, you blow me away. This book is my gift to you. Introduction. When I look back at the darkest days of my life, including leaving behind all that was familiar to me as a young girl, losing my beloved mother in my early 20s, and my mother-in-law shortly after, experiencing the trauma of a near-death experience with my infant son, followed by 2 frightening cancer scares, and most recently living through the heartbreaking loss of a young life as a result of a tragic accident involving my husband, I have come to learn many things. The most important of which is the realization that God does exist. Each of these experiences have allowed me to sense His presence in truly profound ways, eradicating any doubt I may have had prior to them. I have been in two minds about whether to share the stories contained in this book, to write of how God has touched my life, fearful of what others would think, of how their perception of me would shift. I have, however, after a tremendous amount of time and prayer, come to realize that the concerns of my ego are of no consequence. I realize I'm obliged to share a beautiful message with others, regardless of my discomfort, and the hope that these stories of God's constant involvement in our lives will bring a sense of hope and comfort to those who read it, but most importantly to those who need it. This book is a collection of stories of how He has touched me, protected me, guided me, and loved me throughout my life. This book was written for those who, like me, have questioned whether God exists, whether miracles still occur today, whether the Holy Spirit truly is with us in real time. My prayer Chapter 1. Remembering our heavenly home, early childhood. As a young girl, I remembered a place that I had never been to. This memory was my constant companion as I played and ate, slept and learned. In this place, I had been someone else entirely. In the physical world, I was a young girl, slightly built, blonde, with green eyes and a wide smile. Yet in my mind, I was different. The memory of whom I had been previously lingered. How was it possible that I was so obviously X, yet felt like Y? These identities were poles apart. In the past, in the time that had been before, I was tall, strong, powerful, greatly loved, admired, and respected. Yet here I was a weak and powerless young girl. I found these conflicting identities terribly confusing and desperately sought answers, yet didn't have the words to verbalize how I felt inside, and thus I remained silent. How could it be that there was a time before when I had been taught that our lives began at birth? How could it be that I related more with this other identity than the physical person that I so obviously was? How could it be that I was powerful and generous, loving and kind, when I had not yet learned to be these things? Why did I feel so different on the inside compared with how I looked on the outside? Why did I have a memory of a place that I had never been to? Where was this place? Why did I remember it with such clarity? When was this place? Why did I long for a place that I had no recollection of going to? Why did I experience waves of nostalgia, desperate to go back, yet I didn't know where it was that I longed to go? Why did I feel homesick for somewhere when I was already home? Why did I feel ashamed by these feelings, yet I had done nothing to invite them? Hi, sorry about that, I'm back. I actually didn't get a chance to carry on with the video yesterday, and so hence the change of clothes. Excuse me in my walking gear, but I just thought, you know what, let me just get this done. It's more important than looking the part. So yeah, I'll continue. I remember asking myself how it was that I was so obviously a little girl, yet felt like I was someone else entirely, and why it was that I desperately missed a place that I'd never visited before. These feelings and memories stayed with me for a few more years, occasionally surfacing and then fading away, taking with them any confusion regarding my identity as I slowly embraced my physical identity. This experience opened my mind to the fact that there is more to our experience than that which we can physically touch and feel. I was fascinated by the intensity of the feelings and the clarity of the memory, and read everything I could to explain it. In doing so, I came to learn that each of us has a spiritual identity or soul that forms the core of who we are today. That for some, the veil that comes over us at birth, that removes any memory of our time in heaven, is sometimes left a fraction open, which can result in young children remembering a time before, as I did. The feelings I had felt had been too strong for me to dismiss. In addition to this, I had felt them constantly for a number of years, which put paid to any doubts I may have had that these were mere fantasies of a young girl. I never doubted these feelings, but instead sought answers to what they meant. I took great comfort from the books that I read and from the stories that were similar to mine. Firstly, as they confirmed that I was not alone in my experience. And secondly, and most importantly, I took great comfort in the confirmation I received that we had come from a place of great beauty and love prior to our time here, a place to which we would one day return. I learned that this was not our natural home, that we didn't start here and neither would we end here. I learned and accepted as truth that heaven is our natural spiritual home. It made complete sense to me when I came to learn this. A part of me still deeply misses this place. To this day, I still experience an occasional feeling of nostalgia, a homesickness for our true home. I occasionally experience a sense of déjà vu when I'm allowed the briefest of glimpses back, but it is never enough for me to see my surroundings with clarity. It is as fast as the shutter of a camera, offering a tantalizing view into a past I know so little of, but all the same, bringing with it a vague recollection, a remembering, and a deep sense of longing, and then it is gone. This is the only way I can think of to describe these feelings, which, from our earthly perspective, don't make sense at all, as I am home. I was born in South Africa, and apart from 5 years spent in the United Kingdom as a child, and later as a young adult, consider this to be my home, regardless of my British heritage. And so, these feelings of homesickness do not make sense when trying to find some logic in the situation from a physical perspective. But looking at it from a spiritual perspective, it makes perfect sense. As this is not our true home, it is absolutely normal that I would long to go back to where I truly belong, to heaven from where we all came and where we will one day return. My little boy said to me recently, "I wished I lived in the old days, Mum." I asked him what he meant by that, and he said to me, "You know, that place from long ago." I do indeed, my little boy, better than you think. I've come to learn that the spiritual beings that we shared a deep connection with while in heaven will greet us with love and open arms when our time here is complete, rejoicing at our return. I believe that we will dance with joy to be reunited with those whom we shared an eternity with, including those with whom we share our lives with here on earth. The vast majority of the near-death experiences that I have read over the years share commonality, and that is being overwhelmed by the love of Jesus upon passing through to the other side, and being greeted by those that love them, including those previously forgotten during our time here on earth. I find this incredibly comforting and have been blessed with the opportunity of remembering a minute snippet of our magnificent home, and can rest assured that where we return to is beautiful beyond words. I have to smile when reading Betty Eadie's profoundly beautiful story of her journey to heaven and her near-death experience documented in her best-selling book entitled Embraced by the Light. When reading it, one senses her frustration at the inability of our words to describe places and emotions that we cannot begin to understand from our earthly perspective. In Betty's book, she describes her experience of meeting Jesus as follows. "I saw that the light immediately around him, Jesus, was golden, as if his whole body had a golden halo around it. And I could see that the golden halo burst out from around him and spread into a brilliant, magnificent whiteness that extended out for some distance. I felt his light blending into mine, and as our lights merged, I felt as if I had stepped into his countenance, and I felt an utter explosion of love. It was the most unconditional love I have ever felt, and as I saw his arms open to receive me, I went to him and received his complete embrace and said over and over, 'I'm home, I'm home, I'm finally home.' Each person who has experienced the love of Jesus as a spiritual being is forever changed. Dr. Wayne Dyer, in his book Real Magic, Creating Miracles in Everyday Life, includes the story of someone who had no religious training. In fact, his life was spent in very non-spiritual pursuits. I shudder to think what that means. He had been a linebacker, a tough street kid, a self-confessed cocaine addict for many years, and generally a guy who had very little regard for spiritual matters. His name was Gary Busey, an American actor best known for his portrayal as Buddy Holly in the film about the rock and roll star who died at the age of 22. In 1988, Gary Busey was riding his motorcycle and was nearly killed in a severe accident in which he received head injuries that put him at death's door. The following words are Gary's from an article by Luann Lee that appeared in the Long Beach Press on February 28, 1991. "The great tragedy is not death, but what dies within you when you are alive. The second part of my life started on December 4th, 1988, when I crossed to the other side. I went to a room full of lights. I had 3 plates of light come up to my face and tell me I was in a beautiful place of love. And I was love. I could go with that energy there and leave this body, or I could go back to this body and resume my identity. It was my choice. This was not the talk of a new age guru, but a brawny Texan who lived life on the raw edge all of his life, up until his encounter with the other side. The journalist described him as tranquil, thoughtful, and trying not to impress or convince. To his detractors who find his transformation unbelievable, he responds, 'It doesn't have anything to do with believing. The truth goes beyond belief. It happened. I have nothing to say but that. I was there. Whether one believes it or not doesn't matter because it is the truth.' And this former junkie, whose language was once sprinkled with expletives, concluded his interview with these words, The most important word that's ever been invented is the word love. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and Dr. Raymond Moody have written volumes documenting the stories of those that have experienced near-death experiences. There is an almost universal agreement among those who have gone to the edge. They all report blissful lights and a complete absence of suffering. An eternal welcoming. I love that. You can read it and believe, or you can be skeptical. The choice is always ours. The reason I so enjoy these stories is because they reiterate what I already know, but I like to have it confirmed. I'm fascinated by the uniformity of these stories, and in reading them, any fears around death have slowly dissipated over the years. I recently found myself at a crossroads in my life, and in an effort to determine what my divine purpose was, I did a great deal of soul searching and seeking, which included a visit to a Brandon-based journey practitioner who would help me revert back to who I was in spirit form prior to my time here on earth. Just to say, I know this sounds very new agey and out there, but it's actually a very simple procedure where you go into your inner self, your soul, and you go back to who you were before you came to this earth. And if you believe in Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit and heaven, then that, for me, will just take you back to heaven. So there's no need to be fearful of that. In doing so, I was asked to revert back through my life in a meditative state, going back slowly through the years of my life until eventually I had traveled back through my entire lifetime and reached the point of experiencing who I was, or who I had been rather, prior to my birth. In doing so, I experienced myself in spirit form. When asked to describe myself in spirit form, I explained that I was a beautiful and radiant ball of light. When asked to describe how this felt, my immediate answer was pure. And I just want to say here, I can remember this to this day. I felt as if I was just this beautiful, brilliant white ball of pure white light and energy. It was really awesome. There were no other words to describe how I felt in this state. I was simply a pure white, vibrant energy. It was a beautiful experience and realization, which reiterated what I'd known all along, that we were someone else entirely prior to our birth. We were, and we still are, magnificent spiritual beings, perfect in every way. It was a beautiful reminder that within us, at source, we are all pure, divine energy, an extension of our beautiful Creator, containing all that He is within us. It reminds me that we never need to lift our heads in prayer. Instead, we simply need to go within and seek Him there. I never really got this prior to this experience. The concept of seeking God within me was something that I battled with up until that point. Seeing myself as a spiritual being allowed me to realize that as we were prior to our birth, so we still are, and we will be after our time here is complete, that our souls are truly eternal, and when we leave our bodies behind at the end of our time on earth, our souls return to their natural state and home, a process that is as natural as breathing. I just want to say here that after losing my beloved mom and some other lovely friends and families and family members, I've done a lot of research into what happens to our souls after death. And I've read a lot of near-death experience books. And the beauty is that there's, as I mentioned earlier in the first chapter, there's a uniformity to each of these stories. There seems to be a continuity throughout all of them, speaking about a beautiful white light, an intense, almost tangible love of Jesus that our human words can just not explain. They're just inexplicable with our limited language of words. And I found it very interesting that the majority of people, when given the opportunity to return to earth, had absolutely no desire to do so. And that brings me such comfort in knowing that my beautiful, beloved mum and dad are perhaps had the opportunity to return. I'll never know until I'm with them in heaven. But the fact that they wanted to stay in this magnificently beautiful place just tells me how magnificently beautiful it must be. And I take such comfort from that. I also find it quite interesting and amusing that they just don't want to go back into their bodies. They see their bodies, it's almost like discarding like an old dirty jacket. And then you are reformed back into this magnificent spiritual body of yours. Although it's not tangible per se, but they really don't want to get back into these old, dirty, tattered clothes that they speak of, referring to their bodies. So yeah, I just found that quite interesting. So back to the book. This exercise has helped me greatly in that it has provided me with a place. Oh, I lost my place. This exercise has helped me greatly in that it has provided me with a place to go when I find myself experiencing negative emotions such as anger, fear, and anxiety, emotions that I've battled with all of my life. I know that these are merely experiences of the ego and that they are impossible to experience in spirit form. I go back to this state regularly now as I find myself experiencing these emotions. It is incredibly helpful to have this state to revisit, knowing that this is in fact who I am and that negative emotions simply do not exist in this state. Try and remember that during lockdown, #just saying. This exercise opened my eyes to the fact that we are spiritual beings housed in a human body. I recognized that as we go through life, we adopt beliefs which are based on our external experiences and circumstances, and that which we are taught and told, but that they are merely our perceptions of how things are and not reality. Our reality is that, I believe, we are an extension of our magnificently gorgeous divine creator, with direct access to him as we form part of him. Isn't that a lovely thought? We can tap into this eternal energy at any time as it forms our infinite self and is an inexhaustible resource. I have battled with anxiety and depression at various times in my life, and looking back, I've come to realize that it was during the times that I felt separate from others that these emotions would surface. Specifically during the period directly after I had lost someone whom I loved so dearly. This experience was a wonderful reminder that in our true state, our spiritual state, there is no such thing as separation. That as beings of spiritual matter, we are merely an extension of God and are thus never separate from him. In many of the books on near-death experience that I've read, I'm constantly amused to read of the belief the authors felt when discarding their earthly robes, of how repulsed they felt at the idea of having to don these garments once again when returning to their bodies, as I mentioned earlier. This makes a great deal of sense to me, having experienced a little of what it feels like to exist as a spiritual being. Our joy, peace, and happiness are dependent upon us remembering that we can never be separate from God. It is impossible to be separate from him, as we are part of him, and he of us. What a lovely thought. So much of our sorrow in this world is derived from our feeling of separation, which is completely unnecessary. I feel so very blessed to have had the privilege of coming to learn 2 such valuable lessons at a young age. Lessons and realizations that have transformed my life and which have enabled me to find joy where previously there was sadness. I will be forever grateful for the lessons that I've learned in my lifetime. Lessons that I needed to learn in order to find the answers to the many questions that I had. Most importantly, I'm delighted to have learned that we are all part of a glorious tapestry in which our time here on earth is merely a thread. What have I learned from this? I've learned that heaven is our true home. This experience opened my eyes to the fact that heaven is our true home, that we come from a place which is more beautiful than we can imagine, where we are deeply loved, and that this love continues to bathe us as we live out our time here on earth. There is more to our lives than our physical existence. We truly are spiritual beings enjoying a human existence, sent here by God to learn and to grow. Most importantly, to learn to love ourselves and others. We need to find compassion for others. We need to find compassion for ourselves, especially for others, as they too are spiritual beings, merely trying to find their way through life as we are. And here is my prayer at the end of chapter 1. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for the privilege of our existence. Thank you that we have the opportunity to learn valuable lessons through our life experiences, both positive and negative. Help us to remember that the only thing that truly matters is to love ourselves, one another, and you. Thank you for the example you have given us. So that brings me to the end of chapter 1 of my book. And I will be reading a chapter every day. So if you'd like to hear more, then just subscribe and press the notification bell, and then you will see it. There's also a link below to my book. And if you would like to reach out in any way, then leave a comment below. I try and get back to every single comment, and I would really love to hear from you. So lots and lots of love, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care. Bye-bye.